be agreed to, I call the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, 35 of them have the back of the Prime Minister. There's no doubt about that. Knives in the back of the Prime Minister that 35 of them have. If there was a moment in the speech of the Prime Minister that really said it all, it was when he started to talk about somebody abandoning their principles. Because there is no one in this chamber who has a record of anything they claim being a high point of principle ultimately being doomed the way this Prime Minister does. He told us he believed in the Republic and it was doomed. He told us that you could trust the banks and that argument was doomed. He told us he believed in an emissions intensity scheme. Doomed. Then he begged that we support a clean energy target. Doomed. Then he said we needed to support his national energy guarantee. Doomed. And then he told us he was passionate about his big business tax cuts. Doomed again. Because this man now believes that his party will continue to stand beside him. Doomed. It's not going to happen. And no one believes it's going to happen. We've all seen this movie before, and we've all watched the member for Dixon while this debate's been on, furiously doing a bit of writing and then doing a bit of texting back and forth to his colleagues. And I'll tell you, if he only had 35 votes at the beginning of this debate, we can only imagine what he's got after the Prime Minister's speech. Because as this debate goes on, we all know where it's headed. And it's a choice. It's a choice here between somebody who has always abandoned what he said he was passionate about and somebody who has always been passionate about the worst possible things. Because the choice, I mean, think of this, Prime Minister. The person who nearly half of your colleagues prefer was the author of the GP tax. The person who nearly half of your colleagues prefer is the person who cut $50 billion from hospitals. The person who nearly half of your colleagues prefer is the person who axed national dental programs and who was voted by doctors as the worst health minister for 50 years. Because whereas this Prime Minister looks at his beliefs and says, oh no, I'll throw that one away, I'll throw that one away, don't need to believe in that. Any member of the backbench can have a right of veto over anything, no matter how important I said it was. The alternative is somebody who always has looked at the policies of both the Abbott government and the Turnbull government, as we now move to the new riff of the Abbott-Turnbull-Dutton government. That's going to be the new riff that we're heading to. This is going to be somebody who sees a government that cuts penalty rates and says that's not extreme enough. Somebody who sees cutting funding to schools and says that's not extreme enough. Cutting funding to hospitals, they just haven't cut far enough. Government cuts to the pension, on the books here ever since the 2014 budget, just not going hard enough. An NBN that they make slower, that comes later, that's more expensive. They just won't have wrecked it enough. The man who says giving $17 billion to the banks, they just haven't gone far enough. A choice between a man who abandons his principles and one whose views are so extreme he boycotted the national apology. That's what they debated this morning. That's the choice that is driving this government in half, between somebody who stands for nothing and somebody who stands for all the worst possible principles. And all they know when it comes to it is not what they believe, all they know is who they hate. I mean, the press conference to justify why the Liberal Party fell apart this morning, when the member for Dixon went and gave that media conference, he started reiterating his CV, telling us all the wonderful things that he'd done. And then he got to the reason why he just had to challenge. The reason he gave was the Leader of the Opposition. They will blame the Labor Party for everything, including this morning's leadership challenge. The Australian people don't care that you hate Labor, but the Australian people do care that you hold them in contempt. And this government shows that they hold the Australian people in contempt when people are paying for the division of this government every day. They pay for the division in this government when they pay for the increased costs in healthcare. They pay for the division in this government when they pay for their increasing energy bills. They pay for the division in this government when they pay for the fact that everything goes up except their wages, and the government comes here and votes against protecting their penalty rates. This government under this Prime Minister has let the Australian people down all the time. And yes, now they've added they don't just hate the Labor Party, they hate each other too. That's no way to govern this country.